Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 36th Autumn Conference of the VLV. I'm Colin Brown, I'm the chairman of the VLV. I'd like to welcome you all. I think we've got a really good conference programme today, to which I'm very much looking forward. First, the normal announcements, emergency exits there. Please turn off the turn your mobile phones down to silent, and generally I think instructions were up earlier on in terms of what to do in an emergency. So straight into our first session. I'm absolutely delighted that Dame Carolyn McCall has agreed to be our first speaker this morning. To introduce her, I'm almost as delighted to welcome Torin Douglas, one of the most distinguished media commentators in the UK, well known to the VLV, great friend of the VLV, probably best known for his lengthy period as media correspondent for the BBC, but has had many other interesting jobs in the media. So, Torin, I'll hand over to you to introduce Carolyn properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Good morning, everybody. I'm equally delighted to be sharing this session with Carolyn, because we go back to when I used to cover what was going on at The Guardian, and it's wonderful that she is now back in the proper world of the media rather than moonlighting in airlines and so on. But just to remind you about her distinguished career, Dame Carolyn McCall became ITV's first female chief executive in January 2018. She outlined a new vision at that stage, more than television, and I'm sure she'll tell us about that. Before that, as you know, she was CEO of the airline EasyJet for nearly 8 years. She transformed the airline's financial performance. She improved the value and the service, and also led an initiative to train more women pilots. She's then, of course, before that, held various commercial and management roles at the Guardian Media Group, and she became the group CEO there in 2006. So it's a very distinguished career. I've got lots of questions for her. You will have lots of questions for you, and we'll have plenty of time for that. But before we start talking, let's just see a short reel of what ITV's been up to so far this year. Let's see the tape.
I want you to know that you're welcome.
Sure I've got something suitable.
We give this everything we've got.
Is that why I'm doing it? All right.
A little bit of trouble never hurts anyone, eh?
She's a survivor and she will be okay.
You know it's not true, so won't we?
Let's play Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
It's going to be interesting.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
It's all very natural.
The chase is on.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is the Brit Awards 2019.
Are we going back in time again?
You've asked me the question. Thank you. I don't know your answer.
A champagne moment pushing in out of the brilliant flicking side. To find Nationals, the first team to make one. What a way to start the show!
This is love.
You've got my heart.
Love Island 2K19.
So I've been watching you.
You really think she's still alive?
I've got to believe I can save her.
And I hope you've all come prepared to dance.
I see the fun and games are still going on.
I know a killer, Matty.
Good luck, Blade Smiths.
Do you want justice?
All we want is hope.
Snowpiercer is all that's left of the world. Oh my god, get him. Ben. Oh my god.
the world go away?
He was our business manager. He took everything.
Bigger the risk, greater the profit.
And beautiful.
This is about to be epic.
Wow, that was incredible.
Thank you. I think we have a round of applause for all of that hard work. I'm afraid I can't resist starting off by saying we saw Graham Norton, we saw Poldark, we saw Line of Duty and The Bodyguard. Don't you sometimes wish you didn't make programmes for your competitors that were so strong?
Never. I never wish that. And the reason for that is that one of the most successful parts of our strategy is that we have to really diversify away from being overly dependent on the UK advertising market. And you know better than most that that's a volatile and it's quite a cyclical market. And so just 5 years ago, the majority of what we did was about advertising revenue. And just 5 years later, well, kind of over 8 years, we've built up a very, very strong production division, which makes its own money. And it only does that because it does sell content to lots and lots of players all around the world. So, you know, it's not just the BBC, believe it or not, that we that are a very important partner, but it's any broadcaster you can possibly name in Europe, in America, cable companies, Netflix, you know, TNT, and whatever it might be. So it's a very important part of our strategy, which is to be more than TV, and it allows us to reinvest in programming in the UK, which is so important because what we do is very expensive. So whether that's our news output, which we do, you know, we take the nations and regions very seriously, whether that's drama is getting more and more and more expensive to produce. We want to do really good dramas. You know, we have to invest in those, and it's very expensive. So that's how we diversify in order to be able to kind of be more resilient about the volatility around advertising.
Would you ever make an Ant and Dec show for anybody else?
Not likely Ant and Dec. I think they're too associated with ITV, probably. I mean, you know, they are free. They're not free at the moment to do that, but I mean, they are, you know, they are kind of independent people. But I think that's unlikely, actually.
Mm-hmm. So you said you can't be dependent just on the advertising market, and of course you are a commercial PSB, public service broadcaster. That's where ITV's heritage is, where it came from. How are things changing now under your new strategy?
Well, I think one of the most important things is that because of the focus on production, actually the core business, as I call it, the integrated producer broadcaster, because remember, I mean, ITV makes a lot of programs for ITV. So, you know, 60% roughly of what is on ITV is made by ITV Studios. And so there's a lot of focus on production, but there was not enough, I think, investment in technology, in, you know, the platforms that we were operating in order to do Hub, which is a very important way of people viewing ITV, not just for catch-up. A lot of people now, particularly under 35s, will go to Hub before they will go to a channel. But you have to do that really well. The user experience has to be good. The technology behind it has to be good. So, you know, that there was an underinvestment, I think, in technology. And the other area, which is, of course, you know, increasingly important, is data. Not in terms of barb data, which is what we've always dealt with and we do very well, but in terms of understanding how viewers are viewing, but in real time, and you can do that on Hub. So we've put quite a lot of investment in that. We've put quite a lot of investment in marketing our programs, because if you just think of how the world has changed in media, you know, there was a time where our only competition was the BBC, Channel 4 and Channel 5, and then a few smaller stations, then a few hundred smaller stations, but really it was all about the broadcasting ecology. And now, you know, we're in competition for attention, for eyeballs, with all of the global players, all of the streaming services, you know. So we might not be competing for advertising with OTTs, with Netflix and with Apple and with Amazon and all of those, but we are definitely competing for attention. And then on the advertising side, we're competing with Facebook and Google. So we are, you know, we have to really make sure that in any way we can market our programs effectively so that people know where to find them. And that is increasingly difficult, and I'm sure we'll talk about prominence, but in a very online digital world, the issue of prominence, i.e. how PSBs are seen on a screen and found, is one of our biggest threats, I would say, as PSBs, and is actually one of the most, it would be one of the things that keeps me awake at night, because discoverability is so important. You know, sometimes you don't know what you want to know about. So, you know, being able to be presented with a program, whether it might be about Iran or whether it might be about a difficult issue or, you know, an issue you wouldn't normally come into. You know, if you can't discover it in the first place, you can't watch it. So
Let's talk about that now. What is the fear about prominence? Because in the past, the PSBs were at the top of the EPG.
Yeah.
EPGs no longer are as important, or they're even more important?
No, I think they're definitely no longer as important. So they are very important, EPGs, to a certain group of people. So if you are still watching your TV in the way you've always watched your TV, then the EPG is still present, and you can still, you know, the BBC and ITV and Channel 4 get prominence on EPG, because there are very clear rules of engagement with some platforms. I think we'll come back to that. So, you know, if you existed in 2003, which is when the Broadcasting Act was last looked at, you'll be captured within that. So Sky and Virgin are. But the terms on which we do those, the terms of those are also set in stone for a period of time when BBC, ITV and Channel 4 were the players. There was nothing else. And then you had Sky as a kind of embryonic kind of company coming up, and Virgin was barely a blink in the eye. So now you've got, you know, Sky and Virgin owned by global companies with huge budgets so everything has changed since 2003. If you're like many other people now, especially younger people, and when I say young, I don't mean just 16 to 24s, but if you're under 35, under 40, you're coming in all sorts of different ways, including voice. So more and more people, it's a tiny amount, but more and more people are using voice. So they'll just go and say news. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll get ITV News or BBC News. You'll just get news served to you. It could be aggregated.
This is through Alexa and those voice-activated
whatever it
systems.
might be. Voice is an extreme example of that, but it could just be on an Amazon TV. So more and more companies have realized that the way to viewers is to manufacture their own TVs. So soon you will have an Amazon TV, and what they put on their front screen is entirely up to them. And so there's no rules governing that. There's no broadcasting rules for that. And in addition to that, they can sell their prominence. So if you have very deep pockets, you can actually buy your position there. Now, PSBs will never be able to afford to buy their positions on those tiles. And they don't have an EPG. They just have what you call tiles. So Samsung TVs are similar, LG, you know, so increasingly the way people get to discover content is being presented to you through manufacturers, but also through algorithms. And that, I think, is very disaggregating. It disintermediates us completely. It takes us completely out of the picture.
So what do you want to happen? How can the PSBs be protected in that environment?
Well, I think Lord Gilbert is in the room, and I'm delighted that you're here, but the House of Lords did a select committee on the future of public service broadcasting, and I think they have got it in terms of what the threats are and what can be done. And I think there's a clear need for urgent action, because it's not as if it's going to happen in 5 years' time and we're projecting forward, you know, some theories about what might happen. It's happening today. So we're currently negotiating with Amazon about their new TV. And, you know, it is a difficult negotiation, because there are no rules of engagement on that. We're just a commercial player trying to get our position on an Amazon TV. So it's very, and they have their own ways of working. They want to take 30% of all the advertising revenue of advertising that is on an Amazon TV, of our advertising that we work very hard to get. So it's very important, I think, that action is taken today to update and modernise the Broadcasting Act, because it's not fit for purpose for today.
It's one of many threats in terms of the whole way people now watch content, for want of a better word, television, and so. I mean, there are obviously threats on all sides. Which is the biggest threat, do you think? Is it Netflix and all those streamers? Let's start with that.
I think the ability to gain viewers is just hyper competitive, but so is the advertising environment. Now, Sir David Clementi is in the room too, and it's fantastic the BBC doesn't have to worry really about advertising. But we have to worry about both because we're a commercial PSB. We don't get money from anyone. We have to make our own money. So I can't tell you which is more threatening. I think they're both equally threatening, but they're also, it's just also about competition, right? So we haven't got a problem with fair, balanced competition. Where I think it becomes difficult for a commercial PSB like us is when it becomes uneven and unbalanced. So at the moment, the rules for competition between us and Facebook and Google, it's not balanced. We are highly regulated, and I'm not asking to be less regulated, but they are completely self-regulated. And that seems like a uneven kind of position. It puts us at a disadvantage. And it's kind of the same, I think, with the streamers, where we have, and again, I'm all in favour of quotas. ITV has more people, or the same number of people, outside London as it has in London. It has always been very diverse geographically. That's a really good thing for Britain. But, streamers don't have those quotas. They don't have any restrictions. They don't have any age limits. They don't have any, there's no rules or there's nothing governing content on those platforms. And they are massive platforms, 1 in 2 households has got Netflix. So I think it's about fair competition. I'm not complaining that it's a hyper-competitive environment. It just is. And that's actually quite healthy for Britain in a way because there's so much more choice. But I think that we can't be the only players. I mean, the broadcasting industry in Britain is the most highly regulated probably in the world. That's a good thing on the one hand, but it can be a very bad thing if it's not even.
So what do you want the next government to do?
Well, I've talked about the future of public service broadcasting. I think that is, for me, that is the number one priority for the DCMS of an incoming government, is to really, really not say in 3 years' time, oh, we should have done that, to actually take action now, because I think the issues are real and present. That would be my first priority. I think the second thing is not so much. It's not about protect. It is about ensuring a level playing field and ensuring that prominence for PSBs on all platforms is it's even. It's not that some can do one thing and others can do another thing. And I think taking into account the real position of what digital actually means to viewers, which could mean to a viewer that, they're only being presented stuff that, a platform wants to present them. That there isn't a kind of plurality of content that is presented to you where you can make your decision about what you want to view, unless you specifically ask for it. So I think that, to me, is the first priority. I know the online harms paper is already in. I think that's an entirely good thing as well. But I think with the platforms, it is about level playing field. And I think that is being looked at. But I think, it would be very sad if, well, not just sad, it would be very dangerous, I think, if the incoming DCMS thought that it was just too hard to get online players to comply or to stick to some rules and principles, because it is hard, it is complex, but it has to be done, it has to be looked at.
And yet you are in a very good place in many ways. I mean, you are the place, along with the BBC, but in terms of commercial audiences, you are the place that has the big commercial audiences. Last night you'd have had the
election debates.
The election
Yeah.
debate. You've had the Rugby World Cup. You've got
Yes.
all those Ant and Dec shows. I mean, that makes you puts you in a very strong position, doesn't it?
I think we are, look, I think we work very, very hard to be in a strong position. And I think we are in a, we produce really strong content. And it's the range, I think, of what we do. So, it is big entertainment shows, it is big sporting events, because they are listed to free to air. I mean, if we had to compete for those sporting events, we could not get them. We would never be able to afford Champions League. It's way out of our budget, So I think it's the rate and drama. We just do we do a lot of factual entertainment, which is really strong. So we do really, really well. But it's then about making sure that that is seen by millions of people, because our business model depends on it being seen by millions of people, not by hundreds and thousands of people, because that's what advertisers buy. And as I said, the threats of what is called performance marketing. I mean, actually, TV is performance marketing. There has been a big swing to what is about clicks and kind of what is seen to be cheaper in the short term. Actually, if you look at it rationally, the return on investment on TV advertising is the best of any media. But people, because everything digitally is quite new and shiny, there's been quite a big swing from an advertising point of view. So yes, we're working very, very hard to be strong, to be resilient, to have a business which is future-facing, which is why we're, looking at BritBox. I'm sure we'll come on to that. But that's a different way of us having, having an interaction with our viewers, where they become consumers. They can tell us in real time what they want, what they're watching, how they're watching it. But I think it's a great service to viewers. But we can charge for it, because they're already paying for lots and lots of different streaming services. So it's our way of continuing to make our business stronger. Because if we're just reliant on doing what we were doing, it would not be it wouldn't sustain itself for the next 10 to 15 years. We have to continually innovate and modernise.
So we will come on to BritBox, but what have you done so far? You started in January 2018, as I mentioned. What have you done to transform ITV so far?
So I think what we've done is just, we've really looked at everything we do. We are continuing to grow in studios, but we're making it much more efficient and productive. So I don't need to go into that, but anyway, that's what we're doing. And then as I said, we've invested £40 million this year. That will go up to £50 million next year and £60 million the year after, cumulative. So it's 40 plus 10 plus 10, but on a 40 million base, in really strengthening the channels. So that's in the core business. That's in, we've increased the programme budget a bit because of the sporting events. We got the FA Cup. That's expensive. We've done the Rugby World Cup, as you know. We did the World Cup in 2018. So we are continuing to do, those big national moments where the national teams are strong in those sports. We have invested, I said, in data and technology right across the business. We've obviously launched BritBox, which we will talk about. We've also partnered with an ad tech company who understands technology and advertising, and we will launch in January a addressable advertising platform, which means that all the big buyers of advertising will be able to plug straight into our VOD, our video on demand, and they will be able to plan and buy their own campaigns. That is a huge step, because we've never been able to do that automatically. So this is in a very technology kind of forward way. That was all done manually in the past, and only 70% of our inventory could have been. So that's a big step forward. So I think what we're doing is we're just kind of like in everywhere you look, we are kind of modernising and investing, and some of it is really catch up. It really is catching up, because Hub was not anywhere near good enough for what it needed to be doing, and I think it is now much, much better, and it will get even better next year, because we are constantly kind of updating it.
So ITV Hub is your player, and so on. What about the other channels? How do the family of channels relate to each other?
I think the family of channels are still actually quite relevant. We look at it periodically and say, we have 6 channels, and do we still need 6 channels? But it seems to work very, very well because people understand what ITV1 does, which is it's the mass channel. It's for everybody. ITV2 is younger, ITV, and so on. ITV4 is much more sport. We put all our sport that isn't the big national moment, the big, games, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland games. We tend to put, like, all our rugby coverage was on 4, except for the big games. So I think people understand that ITV4 is sport and other programmes that are skewed more towards men, not exclusively to, but more towards. So ITVB is much more female, much kind of more middle ground. ITV2 is much younger. So I think people,
You've missed one.
Yes. Well, ITV, I didn't
Everybody
mean to
here's
miss,
default viewing, I'm
I didn't mean to
absolutely
miss
sure.
anything. I was just giving you examples of the of the kind of demographic profiles of them. So my point actually is that all of them seem to have a real relevance and resonance for their audiences. And when I got to ITV, the first thing I questioned was why they were all called 1, 2, 3, and 4, other than B. And so, and everyone went, well, we've done lots of research, and everyone gets it. And I was like, how can viewers get it? What does ITV2 mean? But actually, the more you research it, the more viewers do get it. It's quite embedded.
Right.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah. So let's get on to BritBox. What is the thinking? A lot of people would say, so this BritBox is ITV and the BBC, and Channel 4 will be coming in.
And Channel 5.
And Channel
5's
5.
in. Yeah.
But how did it come about? They were talking about it before you arrived, presumably. Did you have to give it a seal of approval? What's your thinking on BritBox? So
look, I think some form of BritBox has been talked about for 8 or 9 years. And for one reason or another, it just was not able to get off the ground, whether it was regulatory, whether it was not being able to agree on terms, whatever it was. And when I was looking at the strategy for ITV when I first came in, I obviously got a background briefing on where we were on BritBox, and actually it had died.
It wasn't even called BritBox.
No, in the UK, what we've done very successfully is launched in the US and Canada, and actually we've already exceeded all our targets for that, and it's already making money. And so we had done that with the BBC as a 50-50 joint venture, and I kind of couldn't understand why it had just fizzled out. So actually, Tony Hall was probably the second person I phoned when I was in the job, and I just said, shall we have a cup of coffee and find out what's going on? And that's kind of how it started, because I think we both felt very strongly that what the BBC and ITV can offer viewers in this country is the only place where you can get all the box sets that are British originated content in one place at the same time, and that no one could ever rival the breadth and depth of that, because we own a lot of the rights. So, and one of the things that came up clearly was, if you can't do it in your own market, forget it. It's the one place you should really try to do it. And actually, the windowing strategy and the rights strategy is the thing that takes, it sounds terribly boring, but honestly, it takes so much time to do. And it probably hit the buffers on that quite a few times. But actually, I'm delighted we've got it off the ground, because I think actually it is very distinctive. It is extremely kind of interesting, actually, that the fact that Netflix is all kind of, a lot of it is new and quite, can be quite confusing if you're a viewer, because it's overwhelming, the amount of new stuff. Actually, BritBox, there's quite a lot that's familiar. Now, of course, we will do original content, and it will be commissioned from the UK, so it's helping the production sector too. But it's predominantly kind of curation, and it's the A to Z of British talent and the A to Z of British programmes that you've seen either a long time ago or in the recent past. So, 1 month on Hub, 1 month on 4, 1 month on 5, and then it goes straight into BritBox. With the BBC, it's a year because of the iPlayer deal. But after a year, it goes straight onto BritBox and nowhere else. So actually, there is a kind of freshness about it on a kind of regular basis. And viewers are telling us already, and it's very early days, that they really like it. And it's amazing how many things are missed because there's so much to watch, or there's so little time to watch it. And so people are attracted by that.
How many people here have begun their 30-day free trial of BritBox? Oh, a few. Excellent. I think we have a commercial. Let's see if this persuades anybody to
Is it the
sign
commercial?
up. Please, can we see the commercial?
Are you ready to binge on British? Hello, Adrian Lester. He was in that great thing with John Sim. And he was in that other thing with Catherine Kelly. And we're off. One great show, a stepping stone to the next. You can spend an evening with all the Sheridans. Have a thrilling night with Anna Freed. Jumping from comedy to costume to crime. Like there's no tomorrow. Stream yourself silly with a bit of this and then a bit of that. Hello, Melda. Jump from a Georgina to a Jimmy. Take your cold feet all the way home to Mom. So now you know where to start. You just might not know where to stop. BritBox. A big box of British box sets.
Thank you very much. So I'm not sure, I can see it's star-studded and so on. Will it cut through? Do people know what to do at the end of that? They just search for BritBox?
They just look for BritBox,
They look
and
for
then they
BritBox.
download the app, and off you go.
I'm very literal. I would have liked somebody to
No.
sort of say, this is what you need to do.
I'll
But I'm
pass that
very
on.
old now.
No.
I mean,
do you
so,
know, Torin, I have to say, I did actually say that to the team. I did actually say that. I said, there will be people like Torin.
Yeah. Thank you. So, yeah. Point made. I'll rely on Mark Lawson's judgment. Mission impossible, why BritBox won't rival Netflix.
No, it won't.
So what do you think it will do?
Where Mark Wilson has got that wrong is we're not
Lawson.
trying to... So who, Mark Lawson?
Yeah.
We're not trying to rival Netflix. How on earth could we rival Netflix? I mean, honestly, they are a global company with 100 and something million, subscribers already. They have very, very deep pockets, and their shareholders absolutely are betting on their future, not on their
They're not having to make money.
They're not having to make any money.
Yeah.
So, one, it's impossible to rival that. And secondly, in the UK, we're totally complementary to Netflix. So there will be nothing really on Netflix that is on BritBox and vice versa. So any BBC and ITV content that is on Netflix currently is coming back, is coming home to BritBox.
When it runs out
When
of
it runs
its,
out of its contract. And actually, ITV had very little on anyway. So, that's over the next 18 months to 2 years. So they are genuinely kind of services that can coexist, and they are very different things. And actually what we've discovered in our research is that Netflix homes are, or I say homes with Netflix, are ones that are most likely to take BritBox. So if you're already subscribing to a streaming service, you are more likely to take another one.
But how many do you think, and your strategists think, will people have Amazon Prime and Netflix and Disney and Apple and BritBox, as well as
so
the
there's a
iPlayer
number-
and the ITV Hub?
Totally different. So iPlayer and Hub are completely different to paid-for services because they are totally free and they're downloaded and they're just there. So you're going to watch them because they're free to air. So I think on paid subscriptions, it ranges. Deloitte's will say, so they've done extensive research in this area, that, if you look at the American experience where cable is very expensive and you still have the streaming services in homes, they will say that consumers will have anything between 6 and 8 streaming services or paid-for services coming into their home. Because actually what has changed fundamentally is that consumers are now willing to pay for content that they value and want. And that really didn't exist 10 years ago. If you're Claire, is Claire here? Claire Enders. Enders has done some research, and their research says people will go for multiple streaming, but it will be less. So they will have to make decisions. But remember, Amazon Prime, if you're an Amazon customer and an Amazon Prime customer, you get it free. If you're an Apple customer, you get it for a year free. So you're not actually paying for those, and that's how they will come in to your homes. So I think it's going to be a very mixed kind of ecology in people's homes. And for me, it's going to be about how distinctive you are. So what you can offer that is different to the American streaming services. And the second thing is going to be good value for money. Because if people think $5.99 is really good value to get all of British a month, all of it, it is very well priced. It is at the bottom end of the cost of streaming services.
And I have to say, I mean, when you look at the lineup, and it goes back to all of those great BBC and ITV dramas and other programmes over the years. Mark Lawson pointed out Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which again I have on DVD, but it's very easy to use. The problem is time. We don't have enough time to watch all this stuff. What will cut through with BritBox? For me, I can sit down with ITV3 perfectly happily and then don't try other things.
Well, I think the thing that will draw you into BritBox is it's there and it's going to constantly be there, but it's also going to be constantly refreshed with the recent content that's been on that you might have missed. And in addition to that, we will have some really good British-originated programming coming up that will not be seen anywhere else. So there will be things to kind of draw you in, but there are also things in there that you will have missed. I mean, you'd be amazed how many people are watching Broadchurch, right? Because they've missed it first time round. You'd be amazed. And just remember, when Cold Feet is on, or Line of Duty is on, you will not just be able to see that series on BritBox, you'll be able to see it from 1 to 9, as in Cold Feet, or from 1 to 4 or 5, as it will be with Line of Duty. You'll be able to see the whole thing. If you've missed any of it, you'll see it all from the beginning. So I think there's something very compelling about that. And you're not under time pressure, Torin. You can just watch it when you want. You can watch it if you wake up in the middle of the night, or you can watch it in the middle of the day. You know, you don't have to watch it at a particular time. And that is the difference between what BritBox does and what our channels do.
You mentioned Enders. Enders, looking at your strategy, said it's too safe for our taste. You haven't made enough changes. Jonathan Helliwell of Panmure Gordon talked about the burning platform of broadcast television, i.e., this is going to end one day, and what are you doing about it? And what he said, if it's got 20 years, broadcast television, then this is fine. If it's 5 to 10 years, she should be more radical. Do you accept that? Are you worried that it might be...
Very easy for them to say that, isn't it? It's really, really easy for someone on the outside to say that, because they have no... One, we make a huge amount of money out of our channels in terms of advertising revenue, and everything we're doing is feeding those channels to make sure that we're producing quality content that will attract millions of people, and that will attract advertising, right? So we have to do that and do that really well. In addition to that, we're investing in BritBox, in addressable advertising, in all the other things that I've talked about, right? Now, that is quite intensive. That's taking quite a lot of our capital. And actually, it's fine for Panmure to say that in one breath. In the next breath, they'll say BritBox is spending too little money. In the next, then analyst will say they're spending too much money on BritBox because it's actually going to cost us on our P&L this year £25 million. It'd be £40 million next year. That's straight off the profit. And then a year after that, it's probably around the same. So, it's very easy. I think you have to just ignore all of that because as a management team, we have to do the best thing for the business, in our view. And we have to do that in light of our shareholders and the returns we give them, but also in light of our viewers. And our viewers actually love our channels. And so we don't take the view that linear will only be around for the next 5 years. We think it's got a much longer runway than that. If you just look at the demographic trends of the UK, in 2050, 50% of the population will be over 50. So, and they actually quite like linear TV. So, I actually think, it depends on where you sit. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a sense of urgency in ITV. I'm constantly upping the pace, and I'm constantly trying to get, things delivered. I mean, it was superhuman to get BritBox off the ground in 9 months. I mean, it was an amazing effort from the team, and that's because of pace and urgency. So, I don't really mind what people say, because they don't have to run the business, and they don't have to face the shareholders or the viewers. And I think those, the viewers matter and the shareholders matter because they invest in the company.
You've mentioned demographics. We've looked at the threats coming from Netflix and so on. One of the biggest threats to you and to the BBC and all broadcasters is the changing behaviour of young viewers.
Yeah.
We always assumed that young viewers would grow into broadcast television when they got older. They're now watching in a totally different way. They're not necessarily engaging with ITV and the BBC at all, or you may tell me they are. So what is your strategy for young?
So I think they are, but they are not, it's not a routine. It's not a habit in the way it might be for older viewers. So if you're over 35, I think, your habitual viewing is different to under 35s. They're on their mobiles a lot. They watch a lot of stuff on screen, on small screens. Now, increasingly, actually, people are watching all content on bigger screens. That's quite an interesting trend. And I think, actually, if you produce content that really appeals to them, they will come and watch it, and they will watch it on telly. So a great example of that is I'm a Celebrity, which is on currently, and it's got the highest penetration of 16-34s of any programme at the moment. It's got 73% share, and nearly 3 million 16-34s watch that programme out of around 10 million. So it's doing really, really well for a very elusive audience. So I think if you produce the shows that really appeal to 16-34s, they're going to watch it. 16-24s actually have very different behaviours to 25-34s when they start working properly, and and having to earn money and having to get up early in the morning and stuff like that. Actually, TV does better amongst 25-34s than it does amongst 16-24s. There is no question, though, that all broadcasters, this has always been a difficult audience. It was never easy. Even when I was working at The Guardian, it was always about, oh my God, how do you get these people to watch TV or to read newspapers? But now I think it is much, much, much more difficult. So what do? You just continue to, do good programming and hope and try and attract them. So we do quite a lot of advertising that is targeted in a different way. So we actually try and reach them where they're spending most of their time, rather than just doing kind of broader advertising.
And then going younger still to children. Again, ITV used to have a very, very strong children's output.
Yeah.
It was mandated, it became far less protected, and so less money went into it. It's been hit by other things like the health eating campaigns and advertising. What are you doing about children? Are children going to be engaging, or are their parents getting children's programmes up for them? Well,
I think, one of the things we feel is that it's really important that we do whatever we can on CITV. And, we've increased the budget by 10% this year. We're using the fund, the Children's Fund, so we're bringing back How, by the way. So, that programme, How, with Fred Downage. We are bringing that back.
I think we're probably the generation that remembers How, sort of, yes. Yeah.
Well, we're bringing that back because it's actually information for 6 to 12 years, but we've done it in a very engaging way. So we're doing some stuff. We've also just launched something more for 12 to 16-year-olds, which is called The Rundown, which is a news service, but it's done on Instagram. So it's ITV News repackaging the news in a very kind of young way, i.e., attention span small, lots of snippets, but it's ITV quality news coverage. So we are doing
And how do they get that?
You go on Instagram and you get it through that. So you can get it off, so you go onto ITV News on Instagram, and then you can download The Rundown for
so social media is very important to
I think one of the reasons we
generation.
did that is because, look, I've got teenage children, and I think many of you will know that they do tend to get their news through social feeds. And actually, we think that's quite bad, because they're then not getting necessarily highly accurate, kind of regulated news. It can come from anywhere. So that's one of the reasons we did The Rundown, because we wanted the ITV brand to resonate, but 2, we felt actually it's good quality news, very accurate, obviously, but trusted, but actually formatted for that audience. So we'll see. At the moment, it's doing quite well. It had already 5-point-something million views. It's doing quite well, but we'll see how it goes.
There is this fear, as I say, that children and young viewers will never get into the way of looking at television in the way that previous generations did. Do you think that's a real threat?
I think it's a threat, but I don't think anybody really knows what happens. I mean, as I said, I think there's already a difference between 16 to 24 behaviours and 25 to 34s, where they do watch a little more TV than 16 to 24s. So no one knows yet, because we've never been through it yet, what they will do in terms of viewing. Actually, I think now, TV is whatever appears on your screen. So it's kind of a misnomer to say, they don't watch TV. They're just watching different stuff on TV. So it's going to be about how we attract them or keep them. And you're never going to keep them in volumes, but there is a way of getting people to watch your programmes. Love Island's a good example as well, and that's 40%.
I wondered who was going to mention Love Island
No,
first.
I thought I might as well mention it before you did.
Yeah. Because that has been a phenomenon. And I'm going to open it up to the floor very, very shortly. So this is my last question. What has Love Island taught you, and what have you done with it to make the most of it?
I think what Love Island has taught you is that actually, it's a dating show, right? And it's a modern dating show. And actually what you realise is you have to watch it to know what it is. So a lot of people comment on it and have never ever seen it in their lives. So they have lots of opinions about it. But watch it, because actually stories play out and then they make a lot of sense and they can teach you lots of lessons, right? So, there's no point I'm not sure. I can explain that, Amber, who was a contestant who was very upset halfway through the show and really had a tough time, actually emerged as a winner because of the way she dealt with it and how she handled herself, and emerged with great dignity as the winner of the show. So what I'm trying to say is that if you get snapshots of it, or you don't really watch it, you don't really understand what it is. Now, there's loads of comments about Love Island, but the thing why it works is that actually a lot of young people can relate to a lot of what's going on. They relate to some of the issues that are described and discussed, and they give us very good feedback about that. And actually, it's not just young people. It's had, the last series was nearly 6 million people, which is huge. It's a really big audience.
Right. Who wants to ask the first question if you put up your hands? I've got plenty, so if you have no questions at all, this will not grind to a halt. The gentleman there. Yeah.
Vincent Porter. 2 questions from the first half of your paper. Firstly, you talked about the importance of ITV Hub. Mm-hmm. What is your advertising strategy for ITV Hub? And secondly, you talked about the problem of platforms. Mm-hmm. Are there any discussions at the European level of harming regulations on advertising platforms?
Okay, so on ITV Hub, there's 2 things. One is on the Hub, you just need to think about it like free-to-air. So although it hasn't got its advertising load is reduced on Hub, it has advertising just as it has it's the same advertising as free-to-air. We also have something called Hub Plus, where for $3.99 a month, you can watch it ad-free. So we offer an ad-free option because we can. On Hub. On the platforms and Europe have been looking at a whole load of regulations to do with advertising, and I think indeed Britain has been part of those discussions to date, but nothing has actually come out of those other than the white paper as far as I know. Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, would you? But I think at the moment nothing definitive has come out of that, because if you're Facebook, you will say, we are not a publisher. We are just a platform. So we carry the advertising. We don't have to do much with it. We're just the platform that serves it. So that's quite a difficult thing to do, because if you're not mostly it's publishing regulations.
And will, if Brexit is finally done, do we no longer become subject to those sorts of harmonisation rules?
I think it depends on the withdrawal agreement and whether there's, whether we are still in terms of either, certain regulations or reciprocity, or it just depends, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, hands up again. We've got one here, and then the gentleman in the front row. Yeah. Okay.
Hello, Caroline. Anthony Wills, VLV trustee. Right at the top, you said that you take the nations and regions very seriously. If we look at the history of ITV, started off with the major companies like Granada, Yorkshire, Tyne-Tees and all that. Then it went down to just a few like Carlton. Now it's gone down to ITV PLC. Are there 1 or 2 regional opt-outs a week now?
No.
And then you've got the regional news, which is very important. So you have no other regional output unless you count Coronation Street. So I don't understand how you can say you have lots of people working outside
huge numbers of
London
people.
and what they do.
Okay, so we
Apart
don't
from
have to,
tout for advertising.
So we do. They don't have. We have very small sales teams actually, but we do have sales teams all around the country. We have production teams all around the country. So we have a very large production company and in Wales. We do Coronation Street, obviously in Manchester, but lots of other entertainment shows like University Challenge, Countdown. It's a whole range of productions up in Manchester. We actually do The Voice. All the auditions for The Voice are done up in Manchester. In Leeds, of course, we do Emmerdale. But in addition to Emmerdale, we do a whole lot else. I mean, they're the top 2 soaps in the country. They're between 6 and 7 million, between 5 and 7 million any night of the week. Emmerdale or Coronation Street. It's a huge production, that is. And that's all out of London. And actually, we have 17 regions doing news. 17. And we have 43 offices around the country. So honestly, in a digital age, I don't think you're going to find anybody that does regions and nations quite in as much depth as ITV. And our regional news actually is the most trusted news in the country. Now, the BBC and ITV pride itself themselves on their news output, and deservedly so. I think the way we cover regional news is very community-oriented, which means it takes more resources to get into the communities. We don't just report the news. We're actually part of the communities in every single region. So, I hope you think we do it very well, because we hear that we do, and we take it very seriously.
Thank you. Yep.
I'm sorry, Graham Mitten, I'm sorry I missed the beginning.
That's
because
all right.
it was late. So you may have covered it already, for which I apologise. But it's not only young people who are changing their viewing ways. I've changed my viewing ways. I watch almost no television at the time it is shown. It's inconvenient to do so. It's much more convenient for me to watch it when I want to.
Yep.
This means I cannot watch ITV.
Why?
It's not available on my television.
It is.
It's my smart television. I was told by the company that supplied it, you can't get it on this particular brand.
Well, I'm going to talk to you separately, because actually ITV Hub is available on virtually every single
nowhere
platform.
there on the screen. I scroll down, it's nowhere.
No, well, this is what I did actually touch on this earlier in terms of prominence. I did touch on this, but why don't we, straight afterwards, we'll get ITV on your telly. Even if I have to buy you a new television.
Well, a couple of points raised by Greg. Yeah.
It doesn't say on the website, nowhere does it say you have to do it. We really have tried. We've even asked for a shop when we bought it.
Okay.
We have to buy a different brand TV.
Okay, let's come on. Let me take that
Were you
separately.
already aware of? Is this something you've heard before?
No.
Right.
Not that you can't get ITV Hub
on a particular
BritBox
brand.
you cannot get on every platform. We will be rolling out platforms all the time, but ITV you should get on everything. Yeah.
But the other point that Graham made, because he doesn't watch anything live,
No.
but an awful lot of people still do.
But
Do you have a strategy for live?
Yeah, of course. So I think the things that work really, really well on live, if you were a mad Keen cricket fan, Strictly, okay, that's not one of ours, but anyway, well done, David. But that is precisely my point. If you're watching I'm a Celebrity, which is stripped, okay, so if you've missed one and you've not seen it live, it's hard to catch up overnight. So those programs work brilliantly for live viewing. And actually what you find is everyone's chattering about it as it's happening. So on social, everyone's chattering, and then right afterwards, everyone talks about it, or in the office, everyone goes, did you see, oh my goodness. So those are brilliant for live. And the other, of course, really brilliant thing for live is news and also sport. So if you're a cricket fan, you'd watch the Cricket World Cup. If you're a rugby fan, you'd watch the Rugby World Cup, and football, etc., etc. So those big sporting occasions are incredibly important to TV because they are live moments that unify, and we do that really well.
Thank you very much. Right, some more hands. Yes, we've got one in the middle here. There you go. And if journalists can just say they are journalists, yeah.
Yeah, hi, I'm Matthew Moore from The Times, journalist. You mentioned earlier some of the obligations and responsibilities that come with being a PSB, like out of London quotas. Could you ever see a day, if the prominence regime wasn't updated, where it might make sense, financial sense for ITV to give up its PSB status, give up number 3 slot on the EPG and just operate as a suite of digital channels or as an SVOD?
You know, I really, really hope that never, ever happens, because we take our PSB status very seriously, and we you know, it's very, very important to ITV to be a PSB. And I think there's also quite a lot of power in Britain, because of Britain itself having, you know, strong PSBs as part of our kind of broadcasting ecology, and I think it gives plurality. I think it is better for democracy, and it is better for society. So I think we enjoy and feel privileged to be part of that ecology. So I hope that day would never come.
Michael Grade, when he was chairman, chief exec, he played hardball on that very much, saying we may pull out of news, for example, which was then very strongly sat on by the next chief executive and so on. But PSB...
Look, you know, I know exactly why Michael would be saying that. I think that, you know, the one thing not to do is to put more burden on PSB in terms of, you know, any more regulation. You know, when we are highly regulated already, I think by hampering PSBs, that's where Michael was coming from, which is don't do that, otherwise we will have to. You know, we'll have private conversations about what the implications of something like that would be. But, you know, to Matthew's question, we want to be a PSB, and, you know, we are a commercial PSB, so what we have to do, you know, we have to make money. And that's not always easy, but that's what we want to do.
Thank you. Yep. Yes, more over there. Yes, gentleman there. Yeah.
You've talked almost exclusively until the last couple of minutes about profit and making money and audiences. Is there anything that ITV does that other people don't do in the public service broadcasting context? If I come to you with an idea, why would I go to ITV and not to Netflix or Amazon or one of these others? What is it that you do in public service broadcasting that the BBC doesn't do and that, you know, is something unique?
So I think it's a shame you think that I've only talked about profit, because I don't think I have. I mean, I think I've talked about our output and about content actually being the most important thing that we do. Profit is an output of what we do. What I was trying to describe is that, unlike the BBC, we have to make a profit. And unlike Channel 4, we have to make a profit. So that is a very different kind of PSB. So that was my point on that. I think that why people come to ITV with ideas is because we have a very big studios division who are willing to take risks on ideas, but are also willing to back ideas and put money into them, because they can do that. That's what they're there to do. They're there to make programmes. I'm not saying the BBC doesn't do that. I'm sure the BBC does do that too, and does it very well. But we do that because it's what is important for us. We want to make as much content as is possible for people around the world. So I think people come to us, and actually we also own quite a lot of labels, and they come to us because we give them autonomy creatively, but we take away quite a lot of the back end. So we actually do quite a lot of things they don't want to do, but we leave them autonomous. We don't try and control their creative output. So I think that's one of the things we do. You might say other people are doing that too, but it's an important part of what we do. And as I've touched on already in a response to a question, I do actually think our approach to regional news and our tone and style of how we do that is very, very different to anybody else in the UK. I think we are much more part of the communities we operate in, because we came from a very regionally oriented history. I mean, our history was in the regions. It was never one ITV until quite recently. And I think we do that very well, and I think we take that very seriously.
Thank you. Sylvia, over there. Yeah. Okay, yeah, we'll get there, don't worry. Yeah.
I'm Sylvia Harvey from the University of Leeds and also the VLV. I want to thank you for a fantastic talk, really, so informative. I'm slightly ashamed to say how much I didn't know. Really important what you've been talking about. What I want to ask, though, is this. It seems to me that the Creative Industries Federation and PACT and various other organisations have been quite good at keeping government well informed about the excellence of these industries, film and television, how good they are, how they punch their weight internationally, blah, 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 you know. But actually, it seems to me that now the problem is that politicians are fighting very old battles with each other, very old battles. It's almost as though we were back in 1954, 1955, and we have to focus our attention collectively on the battles of the future. So what I really like to ask is, once the hullabaloo of the election is over, whoever wins or doesn't win, it's going to become absolutely crucial that the good work done by the House of Lords Committee recently, which is trying to engage with the world as it is now, and not with the battles of the past, how you see going forward informing the next government about the risks, the real risks that we face now economically in terms of these industries.
Yes, I mean, I think we've touched a little bit on that. I mean, I do think the Lord's report was, you know, probably got it more than has ever been kind of talked about really publicly. And I think that it was a very important moment. Unfortunately, government doesn't have to act on that report, unfortunately, but I hope they do. So I think this thing about urgency and not waiting, 3 more years to do another report and another report and another report to prove that what we all know, which is that there is a massive issue on prominence, on multiple platforms. I mean, on BritBox today, we're dealing with something like 97 different permutations to get BritBox on all the platforms in the UK alone. Right, 97 different, because there are so many devices, there are so many platforms, there are so many manufacturers, to your point, and all of them have got really different operating systems. So it's technically extremely complex, but there needs to be some standardization, there needs to be some rules and regulations and principles around PSB, why PSB is important on those platforms, how people can get PSB content. And those are just really important issues for plurality. And if they're not addressed today, I mean, you could argue, actually, it's already quite late. And I think then this other thing about is platforms have huge amounts of power, right? If I go into a negotiation with a platform, they hold a lot of leverage over me as a commercial PSB because they can just kind of say, well, we won't pay you for your digital channels, or, because at the moment on Sky and Virgin, we have to put ITV on there for free. And the quid pro quo for that is prominence. But if prominence is being dissipated and loads of people are PVRing, so watching on demand or actually recording, we're not getting value in the same way back. That's not the fault of the platforms themselves. That's because the regulation is out of date. It's completely out of date for the world economically that we live in today. So that's what I would do. I mean, I focus on those things and try not to overcomplicate. I mean, I think the difficulty with governments is they kind of look at it. They've got so many other things. If you listen to the election debate last night, which I hope you all did, incidentally, because 6.7 million people did, the problems and the issues about the NHS and about infrastructure, about Brexit withdrawal and how we withdraw, they're just massive. So my worry is, something like this is going to be right down the list. And yet, actually, we could wake up one day and just say, what happened there? So it's really urgent, I think.
Thank you. I'm going to move down this corner, the lady, and then the gentleman. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Kureka Potong from UCL. I'm
from where? Sorry.
UCL.
UCL.
Yes. So I would like to pick up on the point about discovery. So I'm researching IoT in the home, and I'm trying to connect to your point early on about the new sort of habits of viewers using connected devices like Alexa, Amazon, Google Hub to call up contents. So 2 questions. One is about ITV's strategy to make your content more discoverable through that way of access. And second question is regulation. What should the regulation prescribe or should be doing in order to support ITV and BBC and the like to be more discoverable on through those?
So our strategy is we'll work with as many manufacturers as we can. And you know, we are working with Google, for instance, just to understand voice and to see what we can do. I know the BBC, and David can talk about this later, but are doing their own thing on voice because they think that's such an important trend for the future. We haven't got the resources to do that, right? So we are going to have to be reliant on working with partners to do that and to make sure that our metadata, so metadata becomes a really, really, really important thing. How we tag everything we do can be picked up by voice. That's actually a new skill for broadcasters, not something we've ever had to do before. So it's a very, very important thing for us to really start doing well and in volume. So that's strategically, you know, this whole thing about metadata is a very important thing for us and working with partners. But the thing is, there are so many partners and you don't know who the next person's going to be in this market. You don't know whether Apple's going to come in. You don't know if it's going to be Huawei. You don't know if it's going to be... You have no idea where it's coming from. So you can't just keep working with partners. And that's why some degree of regulation around what and how those partners, those manufacturers of hardware and software have to apply what they do is important. And we have done, actually, with the BBC and Channel 4, some work on that. So I'm very happy to let you see that afterwards, because there's a whole paper on that about how we would influence regulation.
You're just on voice. If somebody said, Alexa, give me the election debate, would they have got last night's one? Would they have got something totally different? If they'd said leaders debate? I mean, that's what worries me about voice, that actually...
But that's the problem. I think that is the problem. Would it be the most recent election debate, or would it go back and do the Tory party, you know, the Tory leader debate?
Right, exactly.
So we just, I don't know, because we have no control over that.
Yeah, understand. Yes, gentleman here. Yeah. Did you have a question? You were just signalling that I'd got 5 minutes. That's fine. Okay. We've got one. We've got one here. Then. Yes. There.
He wasn't saying how.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Robert Beveridge, University of Sassari in Sardinia. Given that you've been so successful in getting commissions from the BBC and therefore helping your income stream, when the time comes for the government to decide on the next BBC licence fee settlement, I hope that you're going to be both publicly and privately supportive of the BBC in maintaining its money instead of the money being diverted towards social policy, because if that money is diverted, the money comes out of the creative economy, which is in the interests of content producers such as yourself.
Yeah. So we don't really publicly comment on the licence fee, as you might have noticed, and because we don't get involved in political debates because of impartiality, in actual fact. But as you know, we are working very, very well with the BBC. We're working in partnership with the BBC on BritBox. We, in fact, have partnered with them and Channel 4 on a range of other topics like prominence. And I think what you're seeing today is more collaboration and cooperation between broadcasters than you've ever seen before. So it's a very, you know, it's a very collegiate, supportive network, in actual fact.
Thank you very much. Got Ray
Snoddy, journalist. As this session comes to an end, could I try and get really deep down into what it is you actually want from government and regulators on prominence? What, if you were in a room with the next secretary, culture secretary in 5 weeks' time, I'm not clear what it is you're actually asking for.
Okay, so we want them to modernise the 2003 Broadcasting Act so that they... They need to review the current regulations with existing platforms like Sky and Virgin, where we have must-offer obligations in return for prominence. In a digital age on Sky Q, are we really getting prominence? So to make sure, the first thing I'd be saying is, are we getting value back for giving our main channel free to those platforms? Are we really getting what the original agreement was supposed to do? One. Number two...
I understand all of that.
Yeah.
It's the new players,
Yes, number two, I was just about to come on to that, Ray. So number two, as far as the other platforms and manufacturers are concerned, we are going to need some legislation and regulation about what is prominence for PSBs on those platforms, whatever those platforms are in the UK. Because without that, it is the Wild West. You are going in and you're having to negotiate with every single manufacturer or platform your position on their TVs or on their platform, whatever that might be. And that is not going to be helpful to PSBs at all. That's what I want.
And would the way this is enforced is you can't sell your televisions in the UK unless they do this? Is that the only way it could be?
I mean, how else are you going to legislate?
Does the government have power?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the government, you know, I know the government. I know from what Lord Gilbert's, you know, stance has been. I think actually people in government get the value of what PSBs bring to Britain. I think that's cross-party. I think they really do. I think it's news. I think it's current affairs. I think it's responsible. You know, it's programming, certain kinds of programming. But it's a particular there's a national kind of cultural thing there that is quite easily lost. I think people get that, right? It's about the how. But if we just keep talking about the how without implementing something, we will be here in 3 to 5 years' time talking about the same thing, but in a much weaker position as PSBs than we ever have been before. So it's about taking action now. It's not about the why anymore. The why is here. It's pretty clear.
Carolyn McCall, thank you very, very much.
Thank you all.